Hey, nice Atypical Daydream t-shirt.
Thanks. It's my favorite podcast.
Mine too. But where can I get a t-shirt?
It's easy. The link is in the show notes.
That is easy. I'm gonna go get one right now.
That's a great idea.
Thanks. Bye.
You bet. Stay cool.
I go to get money out of my bank account, and I can't get any money out of my bank account because it's overdrawn by like $250, which is like, duh. I left with $500. You know, like, what was I thinking?
Hello, my atypical daydreamers. Welcome to the show. And if you didn't already know, this is a podcast about life on the road. So today I've got a really special guest. Well, she's special to me and kind of a big deal around my house. Her name is Miranda Caldwell, and she's my wife, partner, collaborator, best friend. We met in 2014, and it turns out she already had lived a whole big life before we started doing our thing. Today, she shares a road trip she took back in 2000, back when paper maps and payphones still meant something. A lot has changed since then, but what hasn't changed is every human's desire to find their place and their people and to be seen. And sometimes that place is far from where you started. And it takes many tries before you finally step out of the forest into a clearing beyond the trees.
I was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Technically, I grew up in Portage, which is like a white flight suburb of Kalamazoo. My grandparents lived kind of downtown-ish and were like these liberal artist types. And I don't know, I would go to, like when I was a teenager, I would go to Kalamazoo for like culture, which is laughable today because I'm pretty aware that Kalamazoo is not the seat of culture, but we had some cool things going on. Like Kalamazoo is actually exactly halfway between Detroit and Chicago on I-94, which meant that bands would come to Kalamazoo like on a Tuesday or like a Thursday, you know, when they were going between Chicago and Detroit. And seeing the bands come through, there was a sparkle, like a magic sparkle to that of like, look at them. They're out. They're seeing the world. They're seeing people. And like, they're special, right? There's an element of like, they're special. Like audiences showed up to see them. And of course, like, you know, like many of us, my whole thing is wanting to be special, right? Like, I mean, there's this deep thing in me that wants to be seen and wants to be special. And so like growing up, I always felt really different. Like I didn't belong. Like I didn't like the same music as all of my friends. I looked different than my friends. And so when I started going downtown to like go to the Fourth Coast, which was a 24-hour coffee shop, and see all of the people there and smoke cigarettes and all of that, I was like, oh yeah, these are my people. Anyone who's doing something bad or naughty at like, you know, 10 p.m., those are the people I want to be around. So we went to Kalamazoo all the time. So the moment I graduated from high school, I was 17 when I graduated, I moved downtown and I got a job at the Fourth Coast, which instantly put me in like cool girl territory. Actually, I think I'm skipping ahead even. I worked at the bagel shop across the parking lot from the Fourth Coast. That's where I actually worked at first. The Fourth Coast was like the place I would go to and like sit and journal and drink coffee because I was like, you know, smoke cigarettes because I was like a brooding, you know, 17-year-old. So the moment I turned 18, I just had always wanted to leave. The biggest thing I could think of was to move downtown to Kalamazoo out of Portage. But I always had this idea that I would leave someday and like had this romantic notion that there was something out there for me. And apparently when I was little, I used to tell people I was going to go to UCLA because I had a UCLA sweatshirt that was pink and gray. And I thought those were their colors. And I was like, I'm moving to LA and I'm going to UCLA. And I also used to tell people that I was going to move to Germany when I was like 4. And the weird thing is I live in Germany and I lived in LA. So I don't know what all of that was about, but I always wanted to leave. And so when I turned 18, I was working at the bagel shop and I had maybe $500 in my bank account. And I was like, that's enough. I have a car, gold Chevy Cavalier. But you know what? It had a CD player. I have $500. I have an apartment with my brother, and I know he can find someone to stay in my room. I'm getting out of here. And I'm going to drive around the country. And so I just decided to do it. This would have been in the year 2000. So I didn't have a cell phone. I bought a big atlas where it was like each page there's a new state, And I went on MapQuest probably at my mom's house and like printed out my route for the first trip. And before I left, I went to a show up in Grand Rapids to see a band play. And there was a band, the opening band was called the Jazz June. And they were going to be playing with a good friend of mine in South Carolina. And so I went up to them after the show and I was like, hey guys, I'm going to see you in South Carolina. That's going to be my first stop on my trip. And they're like, well, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know. I'm just driving around the US. And they gave me a flyer and they said, if you're in any of these cities at the same time as us, come hang out with us. I was like, okay. So that's what I did. So I left and I thought, okay, there's some stuff going on. I can go to South Carolina and see my friend who I'd known for a few years. I drove straight to South Carolina from Michigan. And because I was with the band, I got a bracelet on my wrist, allowing me to have free drinks. So I was 18. The legal drinking age, of course, in the US at the time was 21. It still is. And I was drinking gin and tonics. And I was hanging out with this band. The Jazz June was there. And I was talking to this guy there, Will, who wasn't in the band, but he was their roadie, which basically was just like their friend who came to help them carry shit, And he was a poet. And he was telling me all about that. And we were talking about my trip. And he's like, why are you on this trip? I'm like, I just want to find a place to go. I want to find where I want to live because I don't want to live where I live. And I feel like Seattle might be the place. The idea was to go clockwise around the United States, not through, just like fully around it. And he's like, yeah, I've always wanted to live in Seattle. And, we really connected and it was fun to talk to him. And we were, a little drunk. And so it was really nice. The overall vibe of the first half of my trip was heartache. It was just like heartache and longing because I would listen to my CDs in my car and, probably cry as I was crossing state lines and just feel my feelings and feel lost. Like, honestly, I just felt lost. Like, I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to go geographically, but I also didn't know where to go in my life. I had no skills, no interests, no hope for college, nothing. And so I just kept driving. I went to New Orleans. For some reason, it felt like it was a shift for me internally because I was staying at youth hostels when I didn't have someone to stay with. And I found this youth hostel in New Orleans and I just met all of these people, like from literally everywhere, every kind of person. And I had never experienced that before. I mean, I was like a YMCA day camp kid. So I was used to being around people of color. I was people with, disabilities, like all of this kind of stuff. But like to talk to people that were from different places, like probably my first time meeting Australians. There were these 2 Australians that me and this other guy got in an argument with about voting because it was 2000. It was a big old election that was coming. And I was doing this trip in October. So the election was imminent. And I didn't want to vote. Honestly, I didn't want to vote. I was like, screw all of this. I'm just going to vote for Nader. And these Australians were like, you don't have the choice. You have the right to vote. You need to vote, But it was just great to like hear people talk about stuff like this, And they all asked me to go out with them. We all went out to Bourbon Street, to the French Quarter. got drunk on the streets. It was so fun. Like these weirdos. Like there was this squat little lady who looked like all she'd ever did was read. And she was from like the Pacific Northwest, and she wore a yellow raincoat and she had glasses, just real like the definition of mousy. She was hanging out with us. And this guy who was like a writer who just said shit to me that like totally shifted me at the time. I don't even remember what it was, but at the time it just felt like it had gravity. It was important for me. Boarding the streetcar, I saw someone I knew from Kalamazoo. Okay, there's Brothel J. Everybody called him Brothel J. I don't know why. I don't know what the deal is. Super tall black guy that always wore overalls and a big flat-brimmed hat. Brothel J. There he was. So it was like my world opened up, but it also got small for a moment. And so New Orleans was like a shift. And then I was trying to get ultimately to California. And I'm not even telling you everywhere that I went. I drove for a month, and there were a lot of places I went that not much happened. They were just sort of pass through. So I finally made it to Orange County and hung out with my friend Christopher and stayed with his family for a little while. And then we had this weird idea that Christopher would come back to Kalamazoo with me and drive with me the rest of the trip. And his mom even said to me, "Are you sure you want to do this? He's going to drive you crazy." Because he's one of those people that like, he and I know each other so well. We've known each other forever. But yeah, he really drives me crazy, And I was like, "No, Barb, it's going to be fine. Don't worry." Funny enough, we skipped LA. He was like, "You don't need to go to LA. There's nothing cool there." I'm like, "Oh my God." But we did go to a hardcore show in Santa Ana. And that was my first time at a show where my feet literally didn't touch the ground, but I was moving. It was like sweaty, packed. It was awesome. I loved it. I mean, I was not even like super into the music. It's just that vibe. Christopher's sister lived in Santa Barbara. And so we drove up to Santa Barbara, and the Jazz June was going to be there. So we met up with them. I hadn't seen them for a while because the last time I saw them was in South Carolina. And by that time, they fucking hated each other. They had been in this van and on this trip. There was like 6 of them crammed in this van. And so then I was this like familiar face, where they were so happy to see me. And they each took me aside and we smoked a cigarette, and they would just bitch about the rest of the band, and I became this, I don't know, person for them to talk to. And Will, the guy who I was into, was there. And I feel like we had even started like emailing each other, which back then, you didn't check your email very often because where's the computer? And I feel like he'd sent me some poems. And he even, I think by then he had sent me a poem. And there was one about Miranda with gin and tonic swimming in her eyes. And I was like, oh man, okay. So I went from heartbreak on the East Coast to like the West Coast being like, all right, hopeful, this is great.
Hey, it's Josh. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. And if so, are you wanting more road stories? Well, good news. I've got you covered. Consider becoming a patron. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories that there just wasn't time for. And you'll be supporting a truly independent podcast. Find the link in the show notes. And thanks. Now back to the show.
The deal was after we left Santa Barbara, I was going to see them again in Seattle. And because we were going to go all the way up to Seattle and then who knows. And he and I were even talking about like, let's move to Seattle together, Will and I. And he was saying, I'll become a poet and you can go to school because he had just graduated college. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll go to college and we'll have this little like Seattle life together, which is funny because I don't think either of us had even been to Seattle at that point. Christopher and I go to leave Santa Barbara And I go to get money out of my bank account, and I can't get any money out of my bank account because it's overdrawn by like $250, which is like, duh. I left with $500. Like, what was I thinking? I wasn't. I was just so like, I have to get the hell out of here. And this is the most money I've ever had. So like, just get me the fuck out of here. So I panic and I'm like, oh my God. And then Christopher is like, it's cool. I'll pay for the rest of the trip. Okay, great. So he and I drive up to San Francisco, and we drive through Big Sur, and it was rainy, and so you couldn't really see very well, but we took the Pacific Coast Highway, and it was beautiful. But I had to drive really slowly. It takes a really long time. And the whole entire time, Christopher was making me crazy. He was driving me nuts. I don't even know why. I don't know why. But we got this hotel in San Francisco. We made it up there to the city. And now I know where the hotel is. I'm like, oh my God, what were we thinking? And we go to check in, and I just say to him, I can't do this. I have to take you home. And he's like, what? What do you mean? And I'm like, I have to take you home right now. I cannot go on this trip with you. And so we just drive all night. I drove him all the way back to Orange County that night because I was like, nope, can't handle this man. No. And he's like, what are you going to do? Because he was going to pay for the trip. I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. You're not coming back to Kalamazoo with me. No. And so we show up at his parents' house at 5 a.m., ringing the doorbell. And Barb, she comes and answers the door. And she's like, what the hell are you doing here? She was pissed. And she's like, Miranda, I told you you weren't going to be able to do it. And I was like, I know. I'm so sorry. I can't do this. So I dropped him back off at his parents' house. Then I called my mom to wire me money because that was it. I couldn't go any further. I was negative $250. I had nothing, I had nothing. And so I had to wait there in Orange County. It was so uncomfortable because his parents were so pissed at me. He was pissed at me. Everybody was pissed at me. They thought they were free of him. Oh, sweet Chris. And he was mad because he wanted to come back to Kalamazoo with me and move back home. Anyway, my mom wires me through Western Union, I think like $300. And I'm like, okay, I'll just go straight home. So I drive through Salt Lake City. I stay in a hostel there. Then I just kept driving, and I made it to Nebraska where my aunt lived. But what was crazy about driving into Nebraska was that there was a tornado, and I didn't know what to do. I seriously panicked. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was so close to her place, and I didn't know what else to do. There's like, if you've ever driven through Nebraska, there's just nothing. At some point, there's just nothing. And so I just said, fuck it, and I kept going. And I just drove. And my one saving grace was they have these gates that they close on the freeway if there's a tornado. And I kept thinking, the gates are open, so keep going. The gates are open, so keep going. There's the ditch. You know where the ditch is. If you get into trouble, you get in the ditch. And I made it. I turned off the road and I get to her place, and she let me, I think I stayed for a couple of nights. I hadn't seen her in a long time. And while I was there, it was like Halloween time. I had been gone for almost a month, and I went on a hayride with her, and because she had kids with my cousins. And I looked up at the sky and I was like, Billy Joe, what is that up there? And she's like, that's the Milky Way. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you can see the Milky Way? And she's like, yeah, you didn't know that? I'm like, no. So I just feel like I learned so much about the world, about people, about whatever. And anyway, before I left her place, she slipped me $100. She's like, don't tell your mom, don't tell Andy, don't tell anybody. So I had an extra little $100 to get home with. So then from Nebraska, I just drove straight home. And I got home and I was pissed. I was pissed because my brother's friend had like trashed my room. He was like sleeping on my mattress with no sheets. And I had to kind of negotiate to get my place back in that apartment. I don't know. I mean, of course, why did I think I could just walk in and be like, okay, I'm home. Give me this back, like he was living there. So, but that's exactly what I did. And I remember the next morning going to the Fourth Coast to like journal about, because I thought, okay, I need to like process this. I need to write about this. I need to journal it. And I just started writing about it. But as I was writing about it, I'm like, what am I even writing? Like, I didn't feel like it had changed my life in the way that I wanted it to, because I ended up in the exact same fucking place, literally same apartment, same coffee shop, I was the same me, It was so devastating. And then right after I got home, I went out with some of my old high school friends, and I don't even remember what we did, but I had to pee and we were in a field. And so I peed in a field, and which seems like a innocuous detail, but when I did that, I didn't realize it at the time, my wallet fell out of my pocket. So that last $100 I had from my aunt and my ID and everything was gone. So I was back with nothing, truly nothing. And the Jazz June was playing in Detroit. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Detroit, and this is going to be it. Like, I am going to see Will, and this is going to be magic. So I get someone to go with me, actually a guy who had a big crush on me, which, how rude that I took him there to see this guy that I wanted to fall in love with. And we go to the show, and it was at like St. Andrew's Hall in the basement, whatever that place was called. And they check your IDs. And I didn't have an ID because I had lost it. And so they put X's on my hands. And I told Will, yeah, I lost my wallet. And he and I had been talking that night about like, why don't you come back with me to Kalamazoo? Let's live there. I told him about Kalamazoo. He was done. He lived in a college town in Pennsylvania. He was done with that. And he seemed ready. And he even told the guys in the band, he's like, you know what? You only have one more stop after this. I'm going to go with Miranda back to Kalamazoo. We're just going to drive there tomorrow. And they were like, okay. So it was all set, and we were going to like have our little magic moment. And then he asked me, how old are you? He was 24 and I was 18, and I hadn't told him that because he had seen me drinking, right, in a bar. And I think he made some assumptions, and I was evasive about it, right? I didn't come right out and say it. And I told him, I said, I'm 18. And he flipped out. He didn't like it. He didn't like that. And so at that point, everything was off. That was it. So he had to retell everybody that he wasn't coming home with me. And we went to a house party after, whatever person in Detroit said that they could stay at their place, and hung out. And then I said goodbye to him. And that was the last I ever saw of Will. And I drove home just completely brokenhearted. So I returned home like negative. It wasn't just that I had this big experience. It's that like the love I thought I was seeking, gone. No wallet, no money, no ID, no place to live, nothing. But honestly, the biggest takeaway from my trip for me was how alone I was, which is like, I did it because I felt alone, right? Like I always felt alone. I still do, And I was alone on the road day after day after day. Nobody was offering to take me in, and that's messed up, right? Like you would have thought that this was some empowering journey of me realizing that, I don't need anybody to take me in. No, it just reinforced the fact that I was alone. And then I found this one guy who I thought maybe was going to do it. And then it was like, are you kidding? You're a joke. You're 18, I'm just like, shit. And so at the end of the day, I came home feeling more alone and less empowered, honestly. It was like a cruel joke, but I'm so glad I did it. I still got so much out of it that I wasn't able to understand then. I mean, I'm 43. That was when I was 18. So it was a long time ago. Now I see all of the like little tiny building blocks of what that did for me in terms of my independence, my ability to navigate the world, not just navigate a map, but like the world, And honestly, I never really thought about it until saying it right now and telling the story right now, how it completely opened my world up to meet all of these different people and to see their backgrounds and see what they were doing. Oh, you can just do that? Like, oh, okay. And I didn't realize my dream of leaving Kalamazoo for a long time. I really didn't, or Michigan or whatever. But man, if I hadn't taken that trip, I don't know if I ever would have.
I want to thank Miranda for sharing her experience, and I want to thank her for all of her support over the years. Okay, so if you liked Miranda's story, then head over to my Patreon. That's where I post all my bonus stories. Next Thursday, I'll be posting another story she told, an epic journey she took to Big Sur, California, where she ended up living off the grid and working for a guy named Bongo. This podcast is created and produced by me, Josh Caldwell. Music by Visual Aid, my side music project. General support and copywriting by Miranda Caldwell. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back next time.